Hi, welcome back if you've been here before. So I don't have a clock in my bedroom. I just used my phone as a clock. So if I wake up in the middle of the night, I will flip over my phone and press the power button to see what the time is and then flip it back over. But the problem is I have a partner, and when I flip my phone back over, it makes this loud clattering noise against my nightstand. Oh no, zoomies. Oh. Pause for zoomies. So I'm going to try to solve that problem today by making a small mat that I can keep on my nightstand that my cell phone will sit on top of, so that when I put it down it doesn't make a loud noise. This should be a really simple, straightforward project. I'm just going to use felt. I'm going to make it double layer, and that's for a couple of reasons. First of all, it'll provide extra padding to have 2 layers rather than 1, but I also want to stitch it only around 3 edges, and that way I can leave the one side open to put the phone into, and that way I can use it as a case as well. So I'm going to dig out what I have for felt and figure out what I want to use for colors. Because it's going to be sitting on my nightstand, I want to make sure that it doesn't clash, because my nightstand is kind of like a teal green color. So because the mat's going to be sitting there all the time, I want to make sure that it actually looks nice. So this is what I've come up with for a color palette. I think it'll work okay with the teal color of my nightstand, but it's also got some nice rich fall colors, which suits the time of year. I'm planning on using this maroon color as the base, and then I'm going to do some sort of flower motif on the front. So this green for leaves, and then I'll do maybe some sort of daisy design using the white and the dark yellow. So I'm going to start by cutting out the main part of it, and I'm just going to use my phone as a size guide. So I think what I'm going to do is just fold this in half lengthwise, and I think that should be good for width. I want to leave a little bit around the outside because I'm going to stitch it up. So I want to make sure that there's room for my stitches. But I think that width should be good. So I'll just kind of center that, and then I'll just roughly mark here where I want my cut line to be. So I'm gonna go with 20 centimeters in length. This part I'll just cut in half. So that's the front and back pieces, and I think what I want to do is round the corners a little bit, just because my phone case has rounded corners and then it just kind of mimics that shape. So I'm not going to be too precise about this. So then for the design, I'm going to keep it fairly simple. I'm just going to do a circle out of the yellow for the center of the flower. I will do some petals out of the white, and then a couple of leaves and a stem from the green. So I think I'm just going to freehand this, but if you wanted to make something like this yourself, you could absolutely find pictures or templates online that you can print out or trace or whatever, and you can do pretty much any design that you like, as long as it will fit the size of your mat. You could also do the same kind of thing in a larger size if you wanted to use it for an iPad or something. And again, with doing this double-sided and leaving the one end open, you can use it as a case as well as a mat. Okay, so I'm gonna start by just drawing out a petal, and then I'll just cut out a bunch of them. So I don't want this to be too large. So I think I'm just gonna do, I don't even know if you'll be able to see that on camera. Something like that. And you don't have to really worry about having pen marks on the one side of the felt, as long as the image is the reverse of the way that you want it to actually be on the finished piece. With my petals though, they're symmetrical, so it really doesn't matter. So I'm just gonna put this face down and stitch it on like that, so you're not gonna see it anyway. So I'm making these petals almost like elongated hearts. But because flowers are organic, the shapes don't have to be perfect. I'm just trying to get them approximately similar in size, but if it's not exactly the same, it doesn't really matter. Alright, so I have my design all cut out and I've got it arranged the way that I like. So now I'm going to stitch on all of the pieces. And I pulled out some embroidery floss that matches the colors of my felt. If you're doing this project yourself, you don't necessarily have to match the color of your thread. It could look really cool with contrasting colors. And you actually don't even need to sew the pieces on if you don't want to. You could just use a fabric glue instead. You just obviously wouldn't have the visible stitches. I would still suggest stitching around the outside. I just don't think that glue would be strong enough to hold up if you're using it as a case and are constantly putting your device in and out of it. So I'm going to start stitching this together, and I'm going to take off the back piece and set that aside because I don't want to be stitching through that while I'm stitching the design. So I'm going to actually take some of the pieces off because I'm going to be moving this around a bit as I'm stitching. So I'm just going to take off the petals and the center part of the flower and just leave my green pieces on, so the stem and the leaves. And when I was placing the pieces of the design, I did make sure to keep a clear border around the outside, just because that's where I'm going to be stitching the front and back pieces together, so I don't want to have my design overlapping that. So I'm just going to put some pins in my pieces just to make sure they're not moving around while I'm stitching. And I would suggest, if you're making your own design, to not do any pieces too small. Like, I wouldn't suggest going any thinner than the size of the stem that I have, just because it's going to make it more difficult when you go to stitch it on. Though again, if you opt for the fabric glue option, you can get a little more detailed because you're not having to do the stitches. So I'm just going to take a length of my green embroidery floss and start stitching. And I'm going to be using a blanket stitch to stitch everything on. So I've got my embroidery floss on my needle, and I'm just going to start at the bottom of my stem here and come up from the back, just right underneath the bottom of the stem. And then I'm going to go back down through both pieces of felt. And then I'll just tie a knot on the back and run my needle through it to hold the embroidery floss in place. And then I've come up again through the bottom. Okay, so then I'm going to go through the side of the stem, through both the stem piece and the back piece, and then come up right next to the stem, just through the back piece. And then before I close the loop, I'm going to run my needle through it to catch it and then pull it tight. And that's what creates the blanket stitch. So you have stitches going this way, but you'll also have your thread carrying along the outside to kind of give it an outline. So I've got my leaves and my stem stitched on. So that's what it's looking like right now. And I just wanted to show off the back as well, just so you can see what that looks like. So when I get all the way around a piece, I will just do a double knot at the point where I started. And I'm just going to show you how to start stitching on a piece once again, just so that it's clear. So I'm gonna do the center of the flower. So I'll just get a piece of my yellow embroidery floss and I'll thread that onto my needle. And then just position approximately where I want it. I'm wanting to leave gaps between all of the pieces just so I don't have my stitches overlapping. So I've got this a little bit above the stem and I'm trying to get it fairly centered just so I have enough room around the sides to add on the petals. So that's approximately where I want to stitch on the piece. So again, I'm just going to come up through the back so that I'm going through both pieces of felt. And then I will stitch back down only through my main piece of felt. So I have one stitch there. And then I'm just going to flip this over, tie a knot, and then just run my needle through so that the working end of my thread is caught in that knot. And then I'll just tighten that up. And then I'm going to come back up through just the main piece of felt, like that. So I'm just going to go around the piece, stitching down through both pieces of felt, up, just along the edge of the piece I'm stitching on, and then grabbing that loop before I pull everything tight. So then once I get back to where I started, I'm just going to push my needle down through that point and pull it tight, and then flip my piece over and then just stitch a double knot. And then trim off the extra. And then that piece is done. Okay, so the design is all done. That's what that's looking like. So the next step is just to attach the back piece. So I'm just gonna sandwich the two pieces together, and then again just do a blanket stitch around the three sides, and I'm gonna leave the top open. And that way I can use it as a case as well and actually insert my phone into it. So I've gone ahead and pinned the corners and the sides just to keep everything lined up properly. And I cut a length of embroidery floss, and I made it quite long because I want to be able to go around all three sides with one piece. So I just want to make sure I have a little bit extra. And I'm realizing that I probably should have worn a different top today because my sweater is almost exactly the same color as the project I'm working on, which was maybe not the smartest thing to do, but too late now. I'm just gonna stick with it. So hopefully you can still see what I'm doing. So I'm just threading the embroidery floss on my needle, and then I'm gonna start in the one top corner, and I want to attach, I think, just to one side initially. So I'm just gonna go through the back, just through a little bit of the felt. And I'm pulling my embroidery floss all the way through, and then I'm just gonna tie a knot at the end and then tighten everything up. I got my knot attached to the inside, so you're not gonna be able to see that once everything is all stitched up. So from here, I'm going to try to line this up fairly well so that I'm coming through in approximately the same spot that the knot is at, but through the front piece. And then I'm just gonna loop this around. So I'm going around through the back and then up again through the front at the same spot that I've already pulled the needle through. And again, I'm gonna pull this all the way through, leaving a little bit of a loop, and then run my needle through that. And then I'm just gonna continue to do a blanket stitch all the way around. So it's the same thing I was doing to stitch the pieces on, except I'm now just doing it along the edge to stitch my two main pieces together. So again, I'm just gonna leave a bit of a space, start from the back, come up through both pieces, and then loop my needle under to catch that thread, and then pull it tight. So that's my little cell phone mat all complete. And that's what the back looks like. And it can also be used as a little pouch. So the last step that I'm gonna do to this is I have these little silicone feet, and I'm gonna add one in each corner just so that it doesn't slip around. Since I'm primarily using this as a mat and not a case, I would prefer for it to stay in one spot and not move around too much. So that's the project done, just for demonstration purposes. Phone fits in there perfectly. I can throw this in a bag or whatever. Very cute, very customizable. You can do it in whatever colors you like, whatever patterns. So I think this will work well as a little mat. And I won't need to worry about waking my partner up in the middle of the night when I check the time. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the project. If you do give this a try for yourself, please tag me on Instagram. I would love to see what you made. And do remember to subscribe to the channel so you can see future videos from me. I also have a bunch of past videos that you can go check out, and I'll leave a couple of those here. Once again, thank you so much, and I will see you again soon. Bye.